Hey everyone, welcome to part three of this ongoing series, converting a Titanic kit into Britannic. There's a lot to unpack in this one. By the end of the video, the progress you see is pretty much where I was when I heard the announcement that Hobby Boss is going to be making a Britannic kit. So, as you can see by that stage, I just felt like it was just too far along in the build to just throw this all away and wait for that kit to come out. Not to say that I may not buy that kit when it comes out. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it.
All right, so there was a couple of things, of course, that I forgot to do prior to installing B and C deck onto the hull. First things, you'll notice I have lines for the rigging now drilled through here. I had to remove this here, the roof of the aft well deck, take it off, run the lines, put it back in. Next things I had to do was extend the walls here on B deck because these rooms were wider than what they on Britannic than what they were on Olympic and Titanic. So I made these extra little walls and put those in. It would have been a lot easier if I'd have did that before I installed the hull or the deck onto the hull, but you know, lesson learned. On here on the A deck, if you remember back to the very beginning, we extended the sides of the hull on A deck and the boat deck. We also have to extend the actual flooring as well. So you see in the corners here where it's pure white, right here, here, and here, and here. There's no paint there. I used some styrene, same one I've been using. And I extended these out as well because these were extended wider and longer on Britannic than what they were on her sisters. That way when I go to line this piece up, you can't see it now, but it'll be, the ends here will be flush with the where the two rails here and where we extended them. And these two pieces will cover up or serve as roof for the expanded rooms. You see the two holes here. These are where the A-deck loading cranes, the aft A-deck loading cranes were originally on the kit. And I'll get a Olympic or a Titanic to show you. So you can see on Titanic, Titanic had loading cranes aft on A-deck. Britannic did not. Britannics were all on B-deck. So what we have to do here is had to remove those loading cranes, and I'm going to fill these holes with putty, right there, sand them down, and make that flush, and the wood decks will completely cover this. So, see if we can get a little putty going in here. Right in there. And in there. And I'm going to let that dry for a bit. And then once that's all dry, I'm going to come back and sand it down. All right, so just like we did on B deck with the extensions there aft, we have to do the same thing on A deck. And you can see I've already made one for the starboard side, but I've not glued it on yet. See, there it is. The only downside to this is we're going to lose a little detail on the kit. These were actually the doors on Titanic to the Veranda Cafe and the Palm Court, but those doors are not in those positions on Britannic. So again, I'm kind of bummed about losing that detail on the kit. It's still going to make it the ship a bit more accurate. So like I said, you can see I've got the starboard side one. I got to do the port side one. After I'm done making them and I glue them on, I'm going to tape down the the deck in this section, and I'm going to give this another shot of white paint. And you may or may not be able to tell, but even though I use the exact same white paint on both different pieces, the color is still off. So I'm thinking maybe once it's all in the same spot, you know, and it's glued down, it might show up all in the same shade.
So what I'm going to start on now is start doing some modifications to the boat deck. You can see I filled in all the holes where the lifeboats would normally go on Titanic with putty, because Britannic's lifeboats were not in these same positions. I'm going to take, there's a little winch right here. I'm going to remove that winch and place it further aft. And all the lifeboats here, or not lifeboats, excuse me, all the benches back here, for example, right here, just gonna take my my scalpel and basically slice them off. All because these were not on Britannic. So they all have to come off. Like so. You can see there's here, here, and the two here in the back. That all has to come off. You want to be as careful with the winch as possible, because again, you're going to glue it further aft, so you really want to make sure you don't damage the winch. This is the same thing we did earlier with the, if you remember on the aft well deck, there was a winch that we cut off of the kit and we put it on the roof of the aft well deck. So this is accurate to Britannic. Now this is one of the pieces that I got from Shapeways. So Britannic had a playroom that Olympic and Titanic did not have, and they 3D printed this piece, and it goes right up here on the boat deck. If you have this piece, you need to remove the double benches that are right here in order for that piece to fit correctly. If you did not get the Shapeways pieces, then you basically just need to make a creative decision as to whether or not you want to keep the benches. So obviously I am going to remove those benches as well. And I'm not too concerned about scratching up my deck, of course, because of the wood decks. Alright. And I'll just need to sand that down a little bit. That way the wood deck will fit flush, as will the playroom right there. This next step will apply if you have the Shapeways piece again. So basically, this piece is going to be right here at the second funnel. And on the boat deck piece, you've got like these little raised parts of the deck that completely surround this entire hole. I don't know how well if you can see them or not, but here on the aft section you can see all these little raised pieces. Basically I have to trim all of that off of here in order to make the playroom piece fit flush on the deck. You don't have to remove the bench or this little raised piece right here. In fact, they may even help the thing stay in place, but that's ideally what you're trying to do, is get it to where the playroom will fit flush right there on the deck. You got to do a little modification on the boat deck. You can see there's this little raised part. They're all over the deck. Well, the playroom is going to go here, and we have to take this raised part off of the ship right around to where the grand staircase would be, in order for this piece to sit flush on the deck. So that's what I'm doing right now, is removing that piece, or at least part of it. So yeah, so that just fly off right there. So now this piece, you line up the aft end of it. It's going to sit on top of the base where the second funnel would go. And now it will fit flush. Gotta trim just a tad more because the very front end is not quite going down as it should, but you get the idea. Okay, so I went ahead and painted the benches that are staying on the ship, and this one winch over here on the port side, and that is painted in the dark mast, which is the same color you see all around the well deck and up here on the sides of the boat deck. You also have to paint right here, right behind the bridge extensions, halfway with the dark mast. So while that stuff is curing, I went ahead and cut out the pieces that I'm going to need to extend the boat deck further aft, just like we did with the two decks below it. So I'm going to glue these on, let them dry, and then I am going to file them down. All right, so the corner pieces are all dry and good, and I think what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and do a whole strip like this and cut it off, and I'm going to attach this whole thing and then file it down because I'd rather just have it keep with the same pattern that I've been doing, keeping them a little larger than they need to be, attach them, and then file them down. And the end result is going to be that all of the deck is going to be flush with the end of the boat deck. If you recall early on, we extended all three decks right here. So that's why we're doing. All right. Gonna let that dry and continue on when it's done drying. And I've got the whole aft extension of the boat deck in place. Did some test fits, and you pop it in there and you close it together. You can see it's flush. So that's in place. It's done. The last thing we got to do as far as modifications to the boat deck, this piece here, this is part of the kit, of course, piece number 46. You have to cut a chunk of it off. You can see this was right here. And it goes right here. You're going to make it flush with the boat deck because that's how this was on Britannic. And the rest will sit on top like it's supposed to. All right, so something I was pretty much expecting to happen was a result of cutting this part of this the deck off of this piece right here and making it level with the bottom part of the deck was there is now a gap right there. Was completely expecting that. Luckily, that's not too hard of a fix. All I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it on, and once it's dry, I'm going to install some putty here on the backside to fill in that gap. And once that's all nice and dry, file it down, give it a shot of paint, and it'll look just fine. So, get to work on putting the glue on. All right, so the next thing in this massive modification to the boat deck is we are going to be modifying these two forward pieces. You can see, for example, this piece goes right here. If I can get it in there so I can show you. So that piece goes right there. And this would be like all the officers' quarters. This here's the bridge up here. But this needs to come off because this was all expanded on Britannic, hence the playroom piece. So that's going to come up. So right about right there. So what I'm going to do is cut it this way, like this. You don't want to cut it this way because you might accidentally shorten the the piece here, and I want to have a little extra on the backside in case we've got to make any further modifications. So very carefully cut that off, and I'm going to do the same over here. So, and there we go. Now I'm going to save these pieces just to be on the safe side. Should anything happen to the playroom, I can always go back and reattach these if it comes to that. So now once that's all glued into place, you see here's the roof. We're going to cut right here and only use the forward section because as you can see, the playroom has its own roof. We'll be cutting off the cover for the grand staircase and attaching that to the playroom. And these two pieces I painted. I'm not entirely certain if I need them yet, but if I have to cut them off and use them, of course I will. Now this presents a further modification that has to be made. You can see the playroom will be covering up right here. So when we put this on, this piece will be too big, so we're going to have to cut a little piece off of there in order for that deck to fit into place. And this is the middle section of the ship. The compass platform is going to go right here. All right, the time has finally come where I am going to glue the A deck or promenade deck onto the hull. I'm going to use this testers I've got instead of the Tamiya because the testers has a much larger brush on it, and I am going to put a very generous amount of glue onto this thing. And it's just, you know, the bigger the brush, easier it is to do. So I am just going to cake this stuff on. Alright, so I just put the wheelhouse in place on the front of the bridge, this little piece right here. I'm going to put some of my paint that I normally use to paint the decks where the wood decks don't cover. That way if you look inside the bridge, it's such a tiny area that you can't see that it is not in fact the wood decks that I've been using. So that's all I'm really doing right here. Gotta go and glue a few small spots down to where it's kind of bubbling like here, for a lack of a better term, but that's pretty much it. The wooden deck is in place. And I do have to add more on here because, of course, the extension that we added to the boat deck before. I am out of
extra pieces I've cut off from this this wood deck kit. So as soon as the new kit arrives, I'll be able to finish this off. Okay, the time has come to apply the cover for the grand staircase dome onto the shapeways piece. I'm using this Loctite on here because the shapeway pieces are not the same type of plastic that that the kits are. So I'm not 100% sure if model glue is going to hold these things in place. That's why I'm choosing to do it this way. So I'm going to pop it on here real quick and make sure it's lined up perfectly. And the way I'm going to line it up, I'm going to put it on here, put this piece on real quick, and just make sure that little hole right there, that it's all perfectly centered. And it looks like it is, from what I can see. So there we go. The grand staircase dome is on the shapeways piece. All right, at this point, the playroom is mostly complete. I've been using the A deck piece from the extra wood deck, as I mentioned, and this is the results we've got. That looks pretty nice, actually. Now, you can see I've got this center section that's all gray. According to Patroness of the Mediterranean, that is how this looked on the ship. So that is why I'm keeping it that way. And we got to bring in Titanic to look at a couple of things. So you can see Titanic had this forward cowl vent, and this is, of course, on the original piece. And Britannic will have that as well. So what's going to happen is I'm going to eventually glue the forward or the second funnel in. I've got the little yellow cowl vent right there that I'm going to put there. And Britannic had two little cowl vents on the sides. So I'm eventually going to add those as well. You can see on Titanic, there's one here right next to that wider vent. And there was one supposed to go on the other side. I lost the piece, and that's why it's not there. So that is one thing that stayed uniform from Titanic to Britannic, was those little cowl vents right there. The next thing that's going to happen is I am going to get ready to glue this piece. It's been modified and complete for a while, so now it is time for me to put that in place, and that's going to help us line up the playroom piece there that's just about finished, mainly because with that piece not being part of the original kit, you need the other pieces in place to help line it up correctly. So I'm going to put a generous amount of glue here. All right, let's go ahead and pop this on. And all right, time to put this funnel in place. And again, I'm using Loctite when it comes to these shapeways pieces because they are not made from the same plastic that all of the plastic on the kit is. So I'm not sure if cement is going to work as intended on these pieces. So the Loctite will help me make sure that that it stays on. So the Loctite will help me make sure that it stays on. And I need to be above it.
Right, so one significant change I've had to make is up here on this forward section, which I've not glued into place yet. I've got Titanic right here so you guys can see the major difference. So let me get this rigging out. I'm just going to set it like it would be in place. The first noticeable change you'll see is to the rigging. If you look at Britannic, you notice I've got that center piece of rigging right behind the lifeboat there, and then one up here on the corner, whereas Titanic, they're all the way down on the boat deck. This is accurate to Britannic because the gantry davits, and I'll use this one as an example, when you had them in here, they would block where all those cables would go down onto A deck, so that's why they did Britannic that way. The aftmost ones will go down on the boat deck. Now, I should have made this change over here on the rigging that I did on the second funnel. It should have been on the very top deck as well. Unfortunately, that's just a mistake I'm going to have to live with. But moving on, another significant change is I used my trusty styrene pieces here to scratch build the lift housing on Britannic. So and this is going to go right here where you see this hole. This is the cover for the first class grand staircase dome. If you you look over here on Titanic, you had this big it's some type of ventilation pipe running from, looks like pretty much right where the lifts are, up until this this backwards facing cowl vent. Olympic had that same configuration as well, but on Britannic they changed things. And on Britannic, the first class lifts right behind the grand staircase went all the way up to the boat deck. So we had to make that housing, and I used my little trusty styrene pieces for that. So I completed it, put it, that's where it's gonna go, right there, and it had like a little cowl vent of some kind sticking up out of the roof. And it was exactly the same width as the dome here, but it was a little bit higher. So like I said, I built that. It's not quite ready to go on yet, but it will be soon. I did put a bottom on this as well, just because when I go to glue it, I'll have more area to glue it onto the deck, instead of just the the four little edges around it. I figured that would make for better support. So moving on, next I'm going to be building the walls that are going to go up here on the roof of the bridge, because Britannic had a compass up here on the roof of the bridge, and that's what I'm going to work on next.
Right, that concludes part 3 of this ongoing series. And stick around for part 4. I don't know yet if part 4 is going to be the final video, but it is quite possible. So be on the lookout for part 4. And if it is not the last one, the part 5 video would I imagine would be very short. Thanks again for watching, everyone. And until the next time, as always, drive safely.